Welcome to My Life, Tanya Applied, with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, a journey into the deepest teachings of Torah and their application to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
A good Moed. We continue our journey in the life-changing Sefer Tanya. This program is made possible by Rena Lights LLC, and it's in honor and memory of Rabbi Yosef Halevi Weinberg Olav Shalom, Rabbi Moshe Pinchas HaKoyen Katz Olav Shalom, and Rabbi Yael HaKoyen Khan Olav Shalom. It's also in schus and merit of Rabbi Zev Yecheskel HaKoyen and Risha Katz Le'edich Yomim V'Shanim Tevis for many long and healthy years. And especially in honor of all our brothers and sisters in Eretz HaKodesh, especially the Tzahal, the soldiers that stand on the front lines, sacrificing their lives to protect our innocent men, women, and children. So we began Perek Yutes, chapter 19, in Tanya, which is a continuation of Perek Yutes. We're talking about Ava Musuteres, the natural, innate, inherent, intrinsic love within each neshama. That's simply our birthright, like our DNA. Doesn't come through Avodah, it's not through nurture, it's nature. And in Perek Yutes, he explained essentially the very root of it. In Chochmah Shebenefesh, what every nefesh and ruach neshama, every neshama has Chochmah, which within it resides Erein Sof Baruch Hu. So the divine infinite, it houses a channel within our finite beings is through Chochmah. That Chochmah is there naturally. We're not talking about Chochmah now as the spark of an idea, the beginning of Bina, which is the contemplation that leads to give birth to midas, to emotions, to love and reverence of God. We're talking about Chochmah that's Makar HaSeichel, that's drawing from Erein Sof, which creates that element of absolute connection between an Neshama and the Eibishter. That's why even a Kal Shebakalim, even someone who doesn't appreciate or understand, even if it's not Al Pi Seichel, it's beyond Seichel. Just has that natural inclination, the natural Mesidus Nefesh that everyone has, every Jew has, to God. The natural faith and the natural Mesidus Nefesh, as he explained in Perek Yutes. In Perek Yutes, we began Uluteis V'Zbir to explain that inherent part of that Chochmah Shebenefesh. Tzarech Levayed Heitiv, he's going to explain well what it says, Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom, that the candle of God is the flame of, the candle, the flame of God. The candle of God is the soul of a human being, of a Jew, like he said. And here we're coming to explain the inyana, the very personality and the defining property of what defines this Ava Mesuteres. So what did we learn? That we dissected and analyzed what is Nishmosim hi lamoshel ke'er haner. The Nishmosa of Yisrael, Sh'ham Kriyim Adam, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, is like an example of a ner. What do we find by ner? Misnanea tomid lamaylam betivei. It naturally gravitates. It naturally flickers upward by nature, all the time, tomid. And the reason for that is b'pnei she'er ha'esh, because the light of fire not desires as in a willpower, but its nature is as if it desires. This is its entire personality, is to desire to reach with teva, lifred ma'psila, to separate, detach from the wick. Ulidovek, I should say, b'shar she'lamayla, and to connect with its root above, b'yisei the eish hakloli. The root is source. So everything gravitates to its source, even though, as he says right afterwards, that tells us it's a higher state. He said, and that's where we stopped. Now we'll continue. What's the chiddush in this? The chiddush in this is something very unique, because everything is affected by gravity and falls to the earth. And here the Eish is going the other direction. the eish of the ner, of the flame of the candle. And here's the chiddush. Va'af, and though, va'af she'al yedei zeh, and even though, by being detached, leaving the wick, yichba, v'lo yoyer klum lamato, the flame will be extinguished and cease to shine and illuminate at all below. In other words, when the flame is connected to the wick, so then it's shining. But let's assume that the flame does fulfill its desire, so to speak, and it does expire, and it does reach upward. What will happen? It will burn out. It will no longer be grounded, and it will be extinguished, like he says, and cease to shine at all. Again, yichbev lo yeir klum lamata. Now we understand that's a hypothetical, because you don't see that happening. If you burn out a candle, you don't see necessarily the process. But this is a mashal to explain the neshama. So that's why the Alter Rebbe is defining the details here. And then furthermore, so you could say, okay, you know what? It's worth it. Why? Because when the flame comes up to its source, then it'll be encompassed in a greater flame, and it'll be even greater than it was down below. But that's not the case. In other words, it's worth being extinguished because it's going to be connected to even a higher light. That's not the case. Because gam l'mayla b'sharshe. When it gets up l'mayla b'sharshe, the flame, into the Yusei the Eish, v'gam l'mayla b'sharshe yizbatl eid b'mitzius b'sharshe. As it's reabsorbed in its source, which is the Yusei Deish, the core element of fire, the identity of the flame's light would dissolve in its source. It'd be completely absorbed and completely dissolved, completely nullified of its identity. So that would seem to say, so what's the point? Afal pikein, bekachu chefetz b'tivei. Nevertheless, this is what the flame is naturally inclined to do. So now we have the moshel of the flame, very clear, defies gravity, reaches upward all the time, even though if it would go upward, it would cease to light and illuminate. And even above, it would cease to be an independent identity, would be completely absorbed in its source. So now we'll understand the pasuk. Why it's called Ner Hashem, Nishmasad. Why Neshama is compared to a candle. Kach Nishmasa Adam. So too is it. In the same way, a person's soul, and v'chein b'chinas ruach v'nefesh, as the Alter Rebbe. So even though the pasuk says Ner Hashem nishmas adam, neshama, so you could say maybe a higher level of the person's soul. We know there's nefesh, ruach, neshama. Nefesh is like nehi, the more behavioral part of the person, the more biological part. Ruach is the emotional, chagas. Neshama is chabad, the highest part of the conscious part of the neshama. So you can say only the neshama. He says no. V'kach b'chinas ruach v'nefesh. As even the lower powers of Ruach HaNefesh, it all behaves like a ner. Chefza v'cheshka b'tiva lipored ulotzeis min haguf. It's natural yearning and desire is to separate from the body, which here is being compared to the wick of the candle, lotzes, and to leave it, exactly like a flame, and what? Not just to leave, for a reason. Ulidovek b'sharsho mikeda b'Hashem chaya hachayim baruch hu. In order to attach itself in its root and source in God, the giver of life, Chaya Chaim, the life of all life, the source of all life. Baruch Hu, may he be blessed. Exactly like the candle. And that's Ner Hashem, Nishmas Adam. It's interesting, the word here is also Ner Hashem. It's the candle of Hashem. So the neshama is being drawn to Elokus, to godliness. But the point is that even a physical candle is a perfect example for this. So there's two stages here. There's wanting to leave, it's being bound to the material world, like a flame wants to leave the wick, and in order to be encompassed in its source, its higher spiritual and more sublime source. So that's the nature of a neshama. And he keeps saying the word tiva, not nature. As I'll explain in a moment, the word nature. This is not through the effort. This is not effort. This is not naved. It's the way Eish, the way a candle is created, and the way a neshama has been created. Just to add, it says in Zohar, same thing in the Kuzari, it's also brought in Shulchan Aruch, in Ramah. In Zohar it talks about when the Id learns Torah, why we shake when we learn Torah, why we rock like this. Or the same thing by davening. They say it's connected to this idea because in Ir Hashem Nishmas Adam, so like a flickering flame, that's why there's the constant movement. There the focus is not so much on the aliyah. It's more through the movement, the constant nanua, the constant movement that's there. Just as an additional point. Okay. And now too he qualifies. Just like we qualified. What's the chiddush abazeh? The chiddush is because the flame is not getting more of its identity. It's losing its identity. It's losing its identity below illuminating. And even when it's encompassed above, like we learned, it also becomes nullified, becomes completely dissolves in its source. So, and nevertheless, that's its nature. So now he says the same thing with the neshama. L'cheira, neshama below, seemingly, is doing its work. Why would it want to go upward? So he says, Hagam shetia ayin ve'efes b'tizbatel sham b'mitzias legamri. Even though, by detaching or departing from the wick, from the body, and being reabsorbed and reconnected in its source, the soul will become null and void. Ayin ve'efes, null and void. V'tizbatel sham b'mitzias legamri. And the soul would completely lose its identity there. V'lo yishar memena, and then he adds something that he didn't say before by the candle. And no yishar memena, nothing would remain of it, of its original character and substance. So with all that, we'll soon discuss this additional point, af al pi kein. Exactly the same expression. The tiva. Nevertheless, this is his natural will and desire, the neshama, just like the flame. So interesting. By the candle, he said that it wouldn't radiate below, and even above, it would lose its identity. And the mata klum. Here he uses the words a little differently. He says, even though I am ve'efes with this battle sham, so the first point he's making, he's not talking about below. Because below you could say, neshama, okay, I feel stronger to be close to my source. With a flame, you could argue the flame has a purpose to illuminate the world below. Here, that's not the goal here. That's another discussion. In many ways, you could actually say, al karcha chatachai, the neshama has to come down to illuminate. But by nature, it's not a problem for it to get back to its source. However, it's losing its identity up there. Ayin ve'efes, null and void, it's his batel sham mitzius legamri. But he adds, "V'lo yisha memenu mu'uma m'muhusav atzmus adishin." So my Maimonides Chassidus talks a lot about what this means. Different explanations. M'muhusav atzmus adishin. But Pashtus, it means that since the neshama comes down below, it become an entity that gives life to the body and has the power to illuminate the world. But when you think deeper, you say, Lo yisha menem uma, he could have just stopped. Lo yisha menem uma, nothing remains of it. But he said, Muhumas musa adishin. That means that something does remain. It's not from Mahusavat musa adishin. So Chassidus, Maimonides Chassidus discusses what that means. In other words, with a flame, you could say the physical flame is completely no longer there. Here, it's there, but it's not the same way it was. Different mahus. And nevertheless, afal pikein zed etzena v'chefza b'tiva. That's what it desires by nature. So what do we have from this? So we see now a natural element, not through Aveda, not through work and effort, but a natural element of the soul to connect to its source. We'll talk more in the next year about the Muhusavat Musa Adishin. Just want to move on to keep the flow going here. And now he continues. The Teva. So there's two ways to interpret the next words. Either you say v'teva za hu shem hamushal, or you say v'teva, and as if it says a comma, v'teva, we just said, is the nature. So nature, zehu shem hamushal l'chol dover she'ein b'chinas tam v'das. Alter Rebbe wants to really drive the point home that this is a natural thing, not something that's coming from a logical place. It's not coming from a rational process. Rational process, I want to go back to my source. I want to be encompassed to my source. That, for example, you have a situation where, let's say, a student and a teacher. A student who loves his teacher, studied much with him, learned much from him, then he, for whatever reason, moved away, and he has a desire that he wants to go back. That you could say is not necessarily a natural desire, that's a logical desire. He appreciates his teacher, he appreciates being in his presence, he will learn more, he feels elevated. Even though he may not have the same identity, here he is, he can be a teacher of his own, a leader of his own, but when he goes there, he becomes like the expression of Shraga B'tira, like a candle in the light of the sun. Which means no one appreciates his light. But still, being by the teacher, that's worth it. But that you could say is a logical calculation. It could also be as a natural part of it, but you can explain it as a logical calculation. Here, says the Alter Rebbe, this Teva in Eish and the Teva Neshama, it's a Hashem HaMushal L'chol Dover She'ein B'chinas Tam V'das. That emphasizes what we learned in the previous chapter, and we're going to learn further in this Perek, that Chochmeh is l'mayla metam v'das. Eid ein sof, les machshava tfisa beklal. This is just who you are. That's why it's not, even if a person is a kal shebekalim and an amoritz, has no ability to contemplate on all of this. That's the nature of a soul. Just like the nature of a person is to be hungry and eat, lahavdil, there's a nature of the soul to be like a flame, to go back to its source. That's ultimately going to explain why the Karev Elecha Dover Me'ed Beficha O Belvavcha say for everyone. Because it's the very nature to have that love of the Neshama to godliness, to Chayechaim, to its source. Even though it loses its identity and nothing remains from the first Muhusamat Musa. So this Tevish is Hashem HaMoshel L'chol Dover She'ein B'chinas Tam V'das. It's a natural. It's a Shema Mushal means Shema Mushal there's a Shem HaEtzem, the Shem HaTeya. The Shem HaMushal means like a borrowed name. It's non-literal. It's almost like a Bahashala. You're using almost like a nickname, if you wish. Now Shem HaKinu is a nickname, but Shem HaMushal is like a non-literal name. What does that mean? It's what you call, whenever you say something and you don't have an explanation for it, you say that's its nature. Why does a lion hunt a certain way? So yeah, of course you can explain why that lion particularly hunts that way, but you'll see other animals hunt a different way. Why is this lion dafka this way? Does it have benefits? It probably has benefits. Then why doesn't everyone hunt that way? The answer is that's its nature. Why do certain things grow a certain way? Other things grow another way. Yes, there's a benefit for it, but we call it nature. So everything that's not b'chinas tam v'das b'shem hamushal is called teva. So we say, that's its nature. Why don't you explain it? Why do you say that's its nature? To anything which is not a product of reasoning and logic. You say why the sun rises at a certain time, the moon another time. That's the nature, teva. So that explains She'ein b'chinas tam v'das, and we'll soon see how that's critical here. V'gam kan hakavona, says the Alter Rebbe. Here too, when we're saying the tiva, the nature of the soul, to be drawn upward and be absorbed, even though it loses its identity, hakavona sherotzen v'chefet zeh b'nefesh, ein b'chinas tam v'das. That the soul's will and desire to be absorbed in its source is not part of reason and logic. It's not a rational thing. Ein b'chinas tam v'das v'seichel musar gemuven, or graspable and intelligible, intelligent rationale. El lamayla ma'adas v'seichel hamuzig v'hamuvan. It transcends logic and any type of containable or graspable intelligence and rationale. And so then where does that come from? So what is that in other words? So he says, V'hi b'chinas chachma shebenefesh. So now we're understanding the inyana of this Ava Mesoteres. This is b'chinas chachma shebenefesh that we talked about in the previous chapter. Sheba erein sof baruch hu. And we learned there that it's l'mayla matam v'das. That's why everybody has it, even if someone who can't contemplate on it is not capable of contemplating. It's who you are. It's your nature. B'chinas chachma shebenefesh is the component of chachma in which the blessed infinite light of Hashem is found. Like we said, Chachma serves as the interface, the channel between that which is beyond intelligence, superconscious, and the conscious. So we have, and we can experience in this world, meaning in our souls and body, inside of bodies, something from beyond. And that's part of who we are. In other words, if we didn't have this part, if we did not have a Yerushalayim Aviseinu, and we'd be like any other creature, as in a mineral, vegetable, or animal, so you'd have intelligence, how to survive. You'd have the functions that each of these kingdoms have. Animals in their way, vegetation in their way, and mineral in their way. However, you would not have the ability to experience a reality beyond yourself. You would not be able to experience a transcendence, which is essentially, in one word, the concept of the flame reaching up to its source. And transcendence is, yes, the opposite of survival. Not the opposite as in the negative way. Survival is all about me surviving. That's what creatures of this world were created, to survive, to be, to hunt, to breed, to protect, to feed, to do what it has to do to be them. That's their role. Their role is not to experience transcendence and go to higher states of consciousness. A neshama, on the other hand, like a flame, has this unique quality. The ability to go beyond itself. That's why you can't expect from an animal to be compassionate when it's hungry. Or be charitable. That there are animals that are kind. But that's their pure nature. You can't ask them to go beyond their personality, so to speak. Because they're not Eish, they're not Nishmas Adam, they're not Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. They're not created B'Tselem Elikim. A human being, you can expect and say that even though you're hungry, Yom Kippur, you don't eat. Even though you may feel a certain way, you have to overlook your feelings. Even though you're saying, hey, I don't have enough money, you have to share and give tzedakah. This is all going against the nature of existence, because the flame is going out of itself to reach its higher source, even though it no longer will be that existent identity that it is down below. That's unique to neshama. And that's its nature. It's l'mayla matam v'das. It's chokhmah in which resides Eid Ein Sof. So we have a few things here. Firstly, we've now established the nature, the very inyan, the very personality and qualities and properties of this Ava Misoteres, because it's coming from this place. And we've also now identified what Chochmah Shebenefesh, that in it resides Eid Ein Sof, that manifests in this element of this yearning and longing of a soul to go beyond its existence down below to another state, back to its source. So when you talk about Avos Hashem, that comes from contemplation, from Bina, or Chochmah, Bina, and Das, like we explained in chapter 3. Chochmah there as the beginning of the spark of an idea. Not Chochmah as the channel to the Eid Ein Sof. And Bina, the contemplation, and through Das, the Iskashus. There you're talking, the inyan of Avos Hashem is coming and makes sense for a person to connect to Hashem. It's a logical process that gives birth, logically, to Avavir, to love and reverence of that source, of God. But when you talk to Ava Misoteres, which is a natural love that comes naturally, that's called Chochmah, the higher level of Chochmah, Koyach Ma, that is connecting to the super-rational, which is Bosheda Eid Ein Sof. There, the desire, the search, is not to become greater, not to become part of, not to become greater, that we should then be drawn to the divine source, because we're becoming completely bottled. Here the desire is to be completely nullified, even if nothing remains, like he said, even though there'll be ayin ve'efes b'tizbatel sham b'mitzius legamri, v'lo yishem ma'menu mu'uma v'muhus v'atzmus harishin. Nevertheless, that's what the Shama wants. So here the Maila is of complete bittul. The Ava that comes through Bizbananus is an Ava that's integrated within us. And that's why it's so important, because it defines you. Here the point is getting out of your own identity, losing your identity into your source. And this is what causes Amunah and Mesiras Nefesh L'mayla Matam V'das, even for a person who doesn't have any logic. This also explains what real Mesiras Nefesh is. Real Mesiras Nefesh is not for any particular cause. Because once there's a cause, it's not true Mesiras Nefesh, as Chassidus explains. So we'll stop here. Good place to stop, especially in the middle of Pesach. It's all about Amunah. So everyone continue having a meaningful Pesach. Last days of Pesach. We should march into the Gula Amitis Vashlema. Guten Moed and a guten Yontif.
This has been My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Please join us again next week. Visit ChassidusApplied.com for archived classes and more resources.